The cold wasn't the worst part. It was the silence. I stood on the manicured lawn of the Sterling estate, my bare feet sinking into the frost-covered grass. My thin pajamas offered no protection against the December wind, but the ice in my father's eyes was sharper than any winter breeze. Behind him, silhouetted by the warm amber glow of the foyer, stood Evelyn, my stepmother. She held a silk handkerchief to her eyes, feigning tears, but I saw the corners of her mouth twitch. In her other hand was the evidence, a diamond necklace worth more than a small house, found planted under my mattress an hour ago. "How could you, Maya?" My father's voice boomed, thick with a disappointment that felt like a physical blow. "After everything we've given you, to steal from the woman who tried to be a mother to you?" "I didn't do it." "Dad," I whispered, my voice cracking. "She put it there. Please, just look at the security cameras." "The cameras were conveniently looped for 10 minutes, Maya," Evelyn sobbed convincingly. "Just admit you have a problem. You've been rebellious since your mother died. But this is a crime." My father didn't look at me. He looked at the legacy of the Sterling name, a name he felt I had dragged through the mud. He was a man of principles, or so he told the press. In reality, he was a man easily manipulated by the soft whispers of a woman half his age. "I won't have a thief under my roof," he said, his voice dropping to a terrifying calm. "You want to act like a street urchin? Then live like one. You're not a Sterling anymore. Leave. Now." "It's midnight," I said, a spark of terror finally breaking through my shock. "Dad, it's below freezing. I have nowhere to go." "Then you should have thought about that before you reached for Evelyn's jewelry box," he snapped. He stepped back and gripped the heavy oak door. Evelyn leaned forward then, just enough so only I could see. The tears vanished. Her eyes were bright, predatory, and triumphant. She mouthed 3 words. "I won, brat." The door slammed shut. The click of the deadbolt sounded like a gunshot in the quiet neighborhood. I stood there for a long time, staring at the golden light leaking from the windows of the only home I had ever known. I waited for the door to reopen. I waited for my father to realize that a 12-year-old girl wouldn't know how to loop a high-end security system. I waited for a shred of humanity. It never came. By 2 a.m., my toes had gone numb. By 3 a.m., the shivering had stopped. A dangerous sign. I realized then that if I stayed at that gate, I would die, and Evelyn would win a second time by being the grieving stepmother at my funeral. I turned my back on the mansion. Every step away from that house was a step toward a different person. The Maya who cried for her father died that night in the snow. I found shelter in a 24-hour laundromat 3 miles away. I sat under the flickering fluorescent lights, rubbing my blue-tinged skin, watching the machines spin. My mind, usually focused on school books and piano lessons, began to sharpen into something else. A weapon. I realized that the Sterling wealth was built on tech. Specifically, data security. My father's company, Sterling Shield, was the industry leader. It was his pride, his joy, his entire identity. He loved that company more than he loved his daughter. "If you love it so much," I whispered to the empty, soap-scented air, "I'll make sure it's the thing that destroys you." 15 years passed. 15 years of foster homes, of working 3 jobs while studying until my eyes bled, of learning how to code in dark basements, and eventually, of finding the right people. People who had been stepped on by men like Arthur Sterling. I didn't just want to be rich. I wanted to be the shadow that eclipsed the Sterling sun. I created Astria Holdings. To the public, it was a mysterious, hyper-aggressive venture capital firm based in Singapore. To the market, it was a shark that never missed a drop of blood in the water. No one knew who the CEO was. I operated through a series of proxies and encrypted communications. I was a ghost, an invisible heiress. And now, the time was right. Arthur Sterling had grown complacent. He had spent the last decade indulging Evelyn's expensive tastes and ignoring the shift in the tech landscape. Sterling Shield was no longer a shield. It was a relic. They were hemorrhaging money, desperate for a partner to save them from a hostile takeover by a competitor. They didn't realize that I was the competitor. I sat in my office on the 61st floor of a glass tower in Manhattan, looking at a digital file. It contained the financial records of Sterling Shield. They were weak. They were vulnerable. And tomorrow, they were scheduled to meet with the representative of Astria Holdings to beg for a bailout. I looked at my reflection in the window. The scrawny, freezing girl in the pajamas was gone. In her place was a woman with a heart made of the same ice that had covered the lawn that night. I picked up my phone and dialed my lead attorney. "Prepare the offer," I said, my voice as cold as a winter midnight. "Make sure the terms are predatory. I want them to sign away their souls before they even see my face." "And the meeting tomorrow, ma'am? Shall I attend?" "No," I said, a slow, dark smile spreading across my face. "I think it's time for a family reunion. I'll be there in person." I hung up and looked at a small framed photo on my desk. It was the only thing I had kept from my childhood, a picture of my mother. "Watch me, Mom," I whispered. "I'm coming home." The air in the boardroom of Sterling Shield was thick with the scent of expensive coffee and desperation. I stood outside the heavy mahogany doors, smoothing the fabric of my tailored charcoal suit. My hair was pulled back in a sharp, ruthless bun. I looked nothing like the broken child they had discarded. Inside, I could hear my father's voice. It was older, raspier, and lacked the booming authority I remembered. "Where are they?" Arthur Sterling snapped. "Astria Holdings is 15 minutes late. Don't they realize we have other options?" "Arthur, darling, sit down." Evelyn's voice purred. It was still like honey over broken glass. "They're just trying to intimidate us. It's a standard power play. They know we're the best legacy firm in the country." I signaled my assistant, Marcus, with a slight nod. He opened the doors. I walked in first, my heels clicking rhythmically against the marble floor. The sound was like a countdown. Arthur and Evelyn were seated at the head of the table, flanked by a dozen lawyers who looked like they hadn't slept in weeks. Arthur stood up, squinting at me. "Who are you? Where is the managing director? We were told to expect a Mr. Henderson." "Mr. Henderson reports to me," I said, my voice steady and devoid of warmth. I didn't sit. I walked to the window, looking out over the city. "I am the CEO of Astria Holdings, and you are late on your Q3 projections by 22%. Evelyn stiffened, her eyes narrowing as she studied my face. I could see the gears turning, the faint spark of recognition struggling to pierce through 15 years of self-delusion. "You look familiar," she whispered. I turned slowly, offering a predatory smile. "Do I? Perhaps you've seen me in your nightmares, Evelyn. Or maybe just in the mirror, reflecting the guilt you've buried so deeply." Arthur slammed his hand on the table. "I don't care who you are or who you look like. We are here to discuss a merger. My company is a sinking ship, Arthur," I interrupted. "Your shield has more holes than a net. You've lost your government contracts. Your encryption protocols are 10 years out of date, and your chief financial officer has been embezzling funds to cover his gambling debts for 3 years. The room went silent. The CFO, a man named Miller who I remembered as my father's loyal golf partner, turned a ghostly shade of gray. "That's a lie," Miller stammered. I tossed a thick folder onto the table. "Page 42. Wire transfers to a shell company in the Caymans. I own that shell company now, Miller. I bought your debt. In fact, I own everything you think you possess." I turned my gaze back to my father. He looked smaller now. Shrunken. "You're not here to negotiate a merger, are you?" he asked, his voice trembling. "No," I said, leaning over the table, my face inches from his. "I'm here for a hostile takeover, but I'm feeling generous. I'll offer you 10 cents on the dollar for your remaining shares. It's enough for you to retire to a small apartment, somewhere far away from the Sterling name." "You're insane!" Evelyn hissed, standing up. "We will go to the press. We will find another buyer. You can't just walk in here and—" "I already have," I said. As of 9 a.m. this morning, Astria Holdings acquired 49% of Sterling Shield's outstanding debt. By noon, I will have the majority. I didn't come here to ask for the keys, Arthur. I came to tell you the locks have already been changed. Arthur's face went from pale to a dangerous shade of purple. "Who are you? Why are you doing this to me?" I leaned in closer, the scent of his expensive cologne, the same one he wore the night he kicked me out, hitting my senses. "You really don't remember? The snow? The diamond necklace? The 12-year-old girl who begged you to believe her?" The blood drained from his face. His mouth hung open, a silent O of realization. "Maya? Maya is dead," I whispered. "She died in the laundromat while you were inside eating steak with your mistress. My name is Director Vane, and I am here to collect the interest on a 15-year-old debt." Evelyn let out a sharp, hysterical laugh. "Maya, the little thief? You think you can come back here with some mystery money and play at being a CEO? That money was stolen. You probably seduced some billionaire to get where you are." I didn't flinch. I expected the venom. "Always the same script, Evelyn. Lowbrow and predictable. But while you were busy spending my father's dwindling fortune on plastic surgery and handbags, I was building an empire. And I started it with the only thing you couldn't take from me: my mother's secret offshore trust." My father's eyes widened. "Your mother didn't have a trust." "She did," I lied smoothly. In reality, I had built everything from scratch. But the lie hurt him more. It made him realize how little he knew the woman he claimed to love. "She knew what you were. She knew what Evelyn was. She protected me even from the grave." I signaled Marcus, who handed me a legal document. "This is the formal notice of default," I said, sliding it across the table toward my father. "You have 24 hours to vacate the building and the house." "The house?" Evelyn screamed. "That's my home. You can't take the estate." "The estate was put up as collateral for the last round of funding Sterling Shield received," I said, my voice dripping with satisfaction. "Funding provided by a subsidiary of Astria. I own the dirt you walk on, Evelyn. I own the bed you sleep in, and by this time tomorrow, I'll own the clothes on your back." Arthur grabbed my arm, his grip weak and shaking. "Maya, please. We're family. I made a mistake. I was misled." I looked down at his hand on my sleeve as if it were a piece of filth. "Don't touch me. You aren't my father. You're just a failing businessman who made a very bad investment." I turned to leave, but stopped at the door. "Oh, and Arthur? I've already contacted the authorities regarding Miller's embezzlement. Since you signed off on all his reports without looking at them, they'll be wanting to talk to you about criminal negligence and tax evasion. I'd suggest you find a lawyer, a cheap one." As I walked out, I heard Evelyn's shrieks of rage and my father's heavy thud as he collapsed back into his chair. But the victory felt incomplete. I knew Evelyn. She was a rat. And when a rat is cornered, it looks for a way to bite. Back in my car, Marcus looked at me through the rearview mirror. "They're panicking, ma'am, but our analysts noticed something. Evelyn made a private call the moment you left. To a man named Silas Thorne." My blood ran cold. Silas Thorne was a fixer. A man who made problems disappear using violence and blackmail. "She's not going down without a fight," Marcus warned. "Good," I said, staring at the Sterling Shield logo on the skyscraper as we drove away. I want her to fight. It makes the crushing blow so much more satisfying. But keep a close watch on her. If she reaches out to Thorn again, I want to know exactly what she's planning to fix. I thought I was the one setting the trap. I didn't realize that Evelyn still had one card left to play, a secret from my mother's past that could jeopardize everything I had built. The following 24 hours were a blur of calculated chaos. I watched from my command center as the Sterling Empire began to implode in real time. Stock prices plummeted like stones in a well. News of the embezzlement scandal broke on every major financial network, and the Sterling name, once synonymous with security, was now a punchline for corporate failure. But I wasn't celebrating yet. Marcus entered the room, his face grim. "Evelyn met with Silas Thorne in a parking garage an hour ago," he reported, placing a tablet on my desk. "We couldn't get audio, but our lip reader picked up 3 words: the Geneva Protocol." I felt a phantom chill, colder than the night I was kicked out. The Geneva Protocol wasn't a corporate document. It was the name of a private encryption key my mother had developed before she died. She was the true genius behind the original Sterling algorithms, the talent Arthur had exploited to build his name. "She's going to blackmail me," I whispered. "She found the back door my mother left in the software." "It's worse than that, ma'am," Marcus said. "If that protocol is leaked, it proves that the foundation of Sterling Shield and, by extension, your new company, which uses refined versions of that code, was built on a security flaw. It wouldn't just ruin Arthur. It would invalidate your entire tech empire. You'd be bankrupt before the week is out." Evelyn wasn't just trying to save herself. She was trying to ensure that if she burned, I would be the kindling. My phone buzzed. An unknown number. "Hello, Maya." The voice was smug, dripping with the arrogance of a woman who thought she'd found an escape hatch. "I hope you're enjoying your little throne. It would be a shame if the legs were cut out from under it." "You're playing a dangerous game, Evelyn," I said, signaling Marcus to begin the trace. "Blackmail is a felony. I've already put your husband's friend in handcuffs. Do you want to join him?" "Oh, Arthur is a fool," she laughed. "He never knew what your mother was actually doing in that lab." But I did. I kept her private journals. If I release the Geneva flaw to the dark web, every server your company protects will be wide open. The invisible heiress will become the invisible beggar overnight. "What do you want?" I asked, my voice trembling. A performance for her benefit. $10 million? Cash. And a signed document withdrawing the takeover bid. Meet me at the old warehouse on the South Pier. Midnight. Come alone, or the upload goes live the moment I see a suit. She hung up. "Did you get it?" I asked Marcus, the trembling in my voice vanishing instantly. "The location is confirmed. But Maya, Thorne will be there. This is a trap for your life, not just your money." "I know," I said, standing up and checking the small high-tech device hidden in my watch, a signal jammer and local server uploader I'd designed myself. "She thinks I'm the same scared little girl. She thinks I haven't spent 15 years learning how to outthink snakes like her." The South Pier was a graveyard of rusted shipping containers and broken dreams. Rain began to fall, turning the salt-crusted ground into a slick mess. I walked into the center of the warehouse, a heavy briefcase in my hand. Evelyn stood on a raised catwalk, Silas Thorne lurking in the shadows behind her, a weapon visible at his hip. "You're late," she called out, her voice echoing. "Drop the bag." "Show me the journals first," I shouted back. She held up a weathered leather book. "The key is written in the margins. It's all here. Once I have the money, you get the book." "You're lying," I said, taking a step forward. "You don't want the money. You want me dead so Arthur's estate stays yours through inheritance law once he's gone. If I die, Astria Holdings enters a legal limbo, and you slide through the cracks." Evelyn's face twisted into a mask of pure hatred. You always were too smart for your own good. Silas? Thorne stepped forward, drawing his suppressed pistol. He aimed directly at my chest. Wait! I cried out. If you kill me now, you'll never get the bypass code for the briefcase. It's biometric. My heart rate has to be active for it to open. Thorne paused, looking at Evelyn. She gestured for him to wait. Open it then. Now. I knelt down, pressing my thumb to the scanner. The case hissed open, revealing stacks of $100 bills, but hidden in the lining of the case was a high-frequency transmitter. There, I said. Now give me the book. Evelyn walked down the stairs, her eyes fixed on the money. As she reached for the bag, I stood up and looked her directly in the eye. You forgot one thing, Evelyn. You told me my mother's code had a flaw. But my mother didn't make mistakes. She made traps. I pressed a button on my watch. Every light in the warehouse turned a blinding, strobing white. A deafening high-frequency pitch erupted from the briefcase, designed to disorient and nauseate. Thorne fell to his knees, clutching his ears. Evelyn scrambled for the briefcase, but I was faster. I grabbed the journal from her hand. The Geneva Protocol wasn't a security flaw. I hissed over the noise. It was a forensic tracer. Anyone who tried to use it to bypass a server would have their entire digital footprint, every bank account, every deleted email, every hidden crime, uploaded directly to the FBI. I pulled a small tablet from my jacket. And while you were talking to me on the phone, the tracer was already working. I didn't need you to give me the key. I just needed you to access the file to prove you were the one in possession of it. The bay doors of the warehouse burst open, not my security team, but the Federal Tactical Unit. Evelyn Sterling, Silas Thorne, hands in the air! I stepped back into the shadows as the red and blue lights flooded the space. I watched as Thorne was tackled, and Evelyn was forced onto the wet concrete. In her face pressed into the dirt, the same way she had forced me into the frost 15 years ago. Maya, she screamed, her voice cracking. You can't do this. I'll tell them everything. I'll tell them you set us up. I walked over to her, looking down at her as she lay in the mud. I leaned in close, whispering so only she could hear. Tell them whatever you want. To the world, I'm the victim of a kidnapping and extortion plot by my jealous stepmother. The evidence is all on your laptop, Evelyn. All those years of secret transactions, I moved them. You didn't just steal from my father. You stole from the government. And they don't like thieves. I looked up at my father, who had just been brought in by a separate police car to witness the recovery of his wife. He looked at me, his eyes pleading for mercy, for a daughter he no longer had. I didn't say a word. I simply turned and walked out into the rain, the journal tucked safely under my arm. The trap had snapped shut. Now it was time for the fallout. The silence that followed the sirens was the most beautiful sound I had ever heard. For 15 years, my mind had been a storm of white noise, the sound of the wind that night, the sound of the deadbolt clicking, the sound of my own teeth chattering in a cold laundromat. Now, as I sat in the back of my sleek black SUV watching the police process the scene, the world was finally quiet. Evelyn was being hauled into the back of a transport van, her silk blouse stained with oil and grime, her carefully coiffed hair matted to her forehead. She looked like a cornered animal, screaming about conspiracies and that brat, but no one was listening. The evidence I had planted, and the real evidence of her greed, was overwhelming. My father, Arthur, stood by a patrol car, his shoulders slumped, as if the very air had been sucked out of his lungs. He looked at me through the tinted glass of my window. He knew I was in there. He knew his life, as he knew it was over. Drive, I told Marcus. The fallout was swifter than even I had anticipated. In the weeks that followed, the Sterling scandal dominated the headlines. It was a media circus. The narrative was perfect for the evening news. A greedy stepmother and a corrupt CFO conspired to drain a legacy tech company, only to be stopped by the brilliant, mysterious CEO of Astria Holdings, who turned out to be the disowned daughter returning to save her family's name. Of course, save was a relative term. I didn't save the company for my father. I liquidated it. I stood in the center of my new headquarters, the top 3 floors of the building that used to bear the Sterling logo. Now, the lobby featured a massive A for Astria, rendered in brushed titanium. Marcus walked in with a stack of legal documents. "It's done, Maya. The court has finalized the bankruptcy of Arthur Sterling's personal estate. Between the legal fees for his criminal negligence defense and the civil suits from the shareholders, he's lost everything." "And the house?" I asked, not looking away from the window. "Sold at auction yesterday. To a shell company." "Your shell company?" I felt a cold thrill. "Good. And what about Evelyn?" Marcus allowed himself a small, rare smile. "She's been sentenced to 12 years for corporate espionage, extortion, and tax evasion. Because of the nature of the Geneva Protocol data, she's being sent to a high-security federal facility. No silk sheets there, I'm afraid." I nodded, satisfied. "And my father?" "He's moved into a small, state-subsidized apartment in the city. He's been calling the office every day, begging for 5 minutes of your time. He says he's sick and wants to make amends before it's too late." I turned around then, my face a mask of indifference. "Is he actually sick?" "High blood pressure, stress. The usual for a man who lost a kingdom. But he's not dying. He just wants his daughter back now that she has the checkbook." "Tell him I'm busy," I said. "Tell him I'm busy building the future he was too blind to see." A few days later, I drove to the old Sterling mansion one last time. It was empty now. The furniture had been carted away, the expensive art stripped from the walls. It felt small. It felt like a stage set after the play had ended. I walked to the foyer, to the exact spot where I had stood in my pajamas 15 years ago. I reached out and touched the heavy oak door. It didn't feel powerful anymore. It just felt like wood. I realized then that my revenge wasn't just about making them suffer. It was about proving that I was the only one who truly understood the Sterling legacy. My father thought it was about the name. My mother knew it was about the code. I took a small can of lighter fluid from my bag and a single match. I didn't burn the house. I wasn't a criminal. But I walked out to the curb and found the old wooden sign that marked the Sterling estate. I doused it and struck the match. I watched the name Sterling curl and blacken into ash. I wasn't a Sterling. I was the architect of my own life. As I drove away, my phone buzzed. It was an alert from my bank. The final transfer of the Sterling Shield assets had cleared. I was now one of the wealthiest women in the country, and more importantly, I was the most feared. But as I looked at the city lights, I felt a strange emptiness. The hunt was over. The prey was caught. "Marcus," I said into the hands-free, "update our acquisitions list. I want to look into the Thorne Group next. Silas Thorne's associates think they can hide just because their boss is in jail. Let's show them that the shadow has a very long reach." I wasn't finished. I had realized that the world was full of Evelyns and Arthurs, people who thought they could step on others because of their power. And I was the one who would step back. But there was one final piece of the puzzle I hadn't expected. A letter arrived at my office the next morning, postmarked from the prison where Evelyn was held. It wasn't a plea for mercy, it was a confession, and it changed everything I thought I knew about the night my mother died. I stared at the envelope. It was cheap, translucent paper with a prison stamp, but it felt like it weighed 100 pounds. I opened it with a silver letter opener, my hands steady, my heart like a block of ice. The letter was short. Evelyn's handwriting, usually a flamboyant scrawl, was jagged and desperate. "You think you're so smart, Maya. You think you won, but you should ask your father what really happened the night your mother's heart failed. Ask him why he was so quick to believe I planted that necklace. He didn't believe me because I'm a good actress. He believed me because he needed you gone before you started asking questions he couldn't answer. I wasn't the only one who wanted the sterling fortune. I was just the only one willing to get my hands dirty for him. Check the basement of the old summer house. The floorboards don't lie. I didn't breathe. The air in my high-tech office felt thin. I had spent 15 years hating Evelyn as the primary villain, but what if she was just the accomplice? I didn't call Marcus. I didn't call security. I drove to the Sterling summer house, a secluded cabin upstate, by myself. It was 2 a.m. when I arrived, and the headlights of my car cutting through the dense woods like twin blades. The cabin was rotting. My father had kept it for sentimental reasons, but he hadn't visited it in a decade. I broke the lock and went straight to the basement. It smelled of damp earth and old secrets. I used a crowbar to pry up the loose boards in the corner, exactly where the letter indicated. Underneath was a fireproof box. Inside were my mother's real medical records and a digital drive. I plugged the drive into my laptop. The screen flickered to life, revealing a video log my mother had kept in her final days. She looked pale, her eyes sunken. "If you're watching this, Maya, I'm already gone." Her voice was a ghost's whisper. "Your father. He found out I was planning to leave him and take the Geneva Protocol with me. He's been slipping something into my medication. I can feel my heart slowing down. He thinks he'll inherit the code, but I've locked it. Only you can unlock it, my brave girl. Don't trust him. He looks like a hero, but he's a coward who hides behind others." The video cut to black. The betrayal I felt 15 years ago was nothing compared to this. He hadn't just kicked me out, he had disposed of the only person who loved me, and then used me as a scapegoat to cover his tracks when I became inconvenient. The final exposure. The next morning, I didn't go to my office. I went to the cramped gray apartment where Arthur Sterling was staying. He opened the door, looking pathetic in a stained bathrobe. "Maya, you came. I knew you'd forgive your old man. I pushed past him and sat at his small laminate kitchen table. I placed the laptop down and pressed play. As my mother's voice filled the room, Arthur's face went from hopeful to a sickly, translucent white. He tried to reach for the laptop, but I slammed my hand down on his wrist. My grip was iron. "You killed her," I said. It wasn't a question. "Maya, It wasn't like that. The company was in trouble. She was going to ruin everything. I loved her, but she was going to take you away from me. You didn't want me," I spat. "You wanted the Geneva Protocol. And when you realized you couldn't crack her encryption, you let Evelyn frame me so you wouldn't have to look at the daughter who reminded you of your crime every single day." "I was going to come for you," he sobbed, falling to his knees. "I was going to bring you home once things settled." "You had 15 years, Arthur. You didn't even check the foster registries." I stood up. I didn't feel anger anymore. I felt a profound, soul-cleansing coldness. "I've already sent the video and the medical records to the district attorney," I said. "And because the crime involved the theft of encrypted government-grade software, your own company's software, the FBI is involved too. This isn't just murder. It's a capital offense." Sirens began to wail in the distance, echoing through the narrow streets of the low-income neighborhood. "Please," he whimpered, grabbing the hem of my coat. "I'm your father." I looked down at him, the man who was once a titan of industry, now a groveling shadow. "No, you're just a bug I forgot to crush under my heel." I walked out of the apartment just as the federal agents swarmed the hallway. I didn't look back. I didn't need to. And the Sterling name was finally, truly dead. The aftertaste 6 months later. I stood on the balcony of my penthouse, overlooking the city. Evelyn was serving life. Arthur had died in a prison hospital 3 weeks into his trial, his heart finally giving out, just like he had forced my mother's to do. Astria Holdings was now the most powerful tech firm in the world. I had used my mother's true Geneva Protocol to create a system that was unhackable, a digital fortress that protected the innocent and flagged the corrupt. Marcus stepped out onto the balcony. "The board meeting is in 10 minutes, ma'am. They're waiting for your decision on the global expansion." I took a sip of my tea. It was warm, a sharp contrast to the cold I had lived in for so long. "Tell them I'm coming," I said. I looked at my reflection in the glass. I was no longer the invisible heiress. I was the sun around which the industry orbited. I had lost my childhood, my mother, and my family. But I had gained something better: justice. And the knowledge that in the end, the cold always melts for those who have the fire to survive it.